Desmond Thomas Doss was born in Lynchburg, Virginia in 1919, in a home where the Bible was not decoration. It was operating instructions. As a Seventh-day Adventist, he believed killing was wrong and Saturday was the Sabbath, which gave the U.S. Army two categories of future paperwork before breakfast. When America entered World War II, Doss was working at the Newport News Naval Shipyard, a job important enough that he could likely have stayed out of uniform. But when he was drafted in 1942, he chose to serve because his conscience did not say run from the war. It said do not take life.
He called himself a conscientious cooperator, which is a very calm phrase for a man walking into infantry training while refusing the most famous infantry accessory. The Army sent him through basic training anyway, where rifles were handed out like punctuation, and Doss kept politely declining the sentence. Some men mocked him, some officers tried to remove him, and military logic briefly treated a medic without a gun like a math problem with emotional damage. At night, while boots and insults came his way, Doss prayed, held to his faith, and kept learning how to save the very men who doubted him. Eventually, the Army stopped trying to make him into a rifleman and let him become what he had been aiming at all along, a combat medic.
In 1944, Doss shipped to the Pacific with the 307th Infantry Regiment, 77th Infantry Division, carrying a medical kit and a promise instead of a weapon. On Guam, under fire, he treated wounded soldiers until the old jokes about cowardice began having a serious problem with the evidence. At Leyte, he did it again, earning a second Bronze Star for valor, while proving that courage does not always arrive holding a trigger. By the spring of 1945, Doss and the 77th reached Okinawa, where the Maeda Escarpment rose above the battlefield like a cliff with a terrible job description. American soldiers called it Hacksaw Ridge, and the name was not marketing. It was a jagged wall, roughly 400 feet high, defended by tunnels, caves, and machine guns.
To reach the top, soldiers climbed cargo nets under fire, which is the sort of route map that makes a sane person check if there is a back door. Doss climbed with them on May 2nd, 1945, unarmed, a medic moving into a place designed to punish anyone who stood upright. The fighting was so intense that even medics were targets, so Doss had removed the markings that identified him, making his job more dangerous and less visible. Day after day, he crawled and ran through shell fire, treating men where they fell and dragging them toward cover with hands meant for bandages, not bullets. The men who once doubted him now watched him go out again and again. And battlefield sarcasm has a way of shutting up when courage keeps clocking in.
Then came May 5th, when the attack collapsed and the order went out for American troops to retreat from the top of the ridge. Around 75 wounded men were still trapped above the cliff, too injured to get down by themselves, while fire swept over the escarpment. Doss could have gone down with the others. Nobody sensible would have called survival a failure. But he stayed, because his rule had never been that he would avoid danger. His rule was that he would not kill. One by one, he found wounded soldiers, treated them, dragged them to the edge, tied them into a rope-supported litter, and lowered them down. Each trip meant crossing open ground again, with mortar shells, rifle fire, and machine guns turning the ridge into a place that did not want witnesses. Doss later remembered praying for help to get one more, and then one more became another man breathing below the cliff. Hour after hour, the number grew until the impossible had a count. An estimated 75 men brought off Hacksaw Ridge by one unarmed medic. The Army would later credit him with many lives saved, but Doss, being Doss, reportedly thought the number should be lower, because humility also had apparently enlisted. And he was not finished. On later days in Okinawa, he kept treating wounded men under fire, crawling toward danger as if fear had failed inspection.
On May 21, near Shuri, grenade fragments tore into his legs during a night attack, and Doss treated his own wounds instead of calling another medic into fire. He waited hours for litter bearers, then saw a worse wounded man nearby and rolled off his stretcher so they could carry that soldier first. A sniper's bullet then broke his arm, so Doss used a rifle stock as a splint, which was probably the only way a rifle ever helped him. He crawled hundreds of yards to an aid station, still refusing to become the center of the story, even while the story was actively trying to center him. Doss survived Okinawa, but the war followed him home through wounds, illness, and years of recovery, because heroism does not end when the camera wants it to. On October 12, 1945, President Harry S. Truman placed the Medal of Honor on Desmond Doss, the first conscientious objector to receive it. Truman reportedly told him he deserved it, and for once the ceremony language was not exaggerating for the stationary. The medal honored more than one night on a cliff. It honored Guam, Leyte, Okinawa, and a man whose conscience stayed awake under pressure. Desmond Doss died in 2006, but his story keeps asking a hard question. What if courage is not the willingness to hurt someone, but the refusal to abandon them? He walked into one of World War II's bloodiest places without a weapon, and left with dozens of lives behind him, which is the most oddly human kind of defiance. Mercy, under fire, refusing to move.